and the story of the Hijrah. A lot of the discussions will be about how he was managing this new reality that he had, alayhi salatu wasalam, managing this new city, or this new country, if you may, that he was ruling, and the difficulties that come with that. So a lot of these stories are going to be based on that. And the way I see it is that that's what we're talking about, and in the midst of all of that, there'll be battles that I'll tell you the stories of. So it's not really the battles that are the meat of the story, it's all the management. It's what the Prophet ﷺ's vision was. It's how he was trying to achieve that vision. It's the education and the mentorship and the da'wah, and the change of the norms and the customs and the amr al-ma'ruf and the nahy al-munkar, all these things that occurred in Medina that I want to share with you. It's these etiquettes and characteristics that he was instilling in people in front of him, and the knowledge that he was spreading. But in the midst of all of that, battles occurred, and these battles had to occur because he was not being treated fairly, alayhi salatu wasalam. He was not being treated equally, and I'm going to point that out a little bit today. So even though probably 60% of the time spent until the end of this series will be talking about battles, still the reality of it is that that is not the majority of what was occurring during his life, alayhi salatu wasalam. It's just battles are very extreme situations, so people tend to remember details. And in extreme situations, there's a lot to learn. And the Quran would come and talk about those extreme situations, a lot of depth, which gives us that, that opportunity to learn these lessons. So it's going to seem like it's all battle, but really it isn't. And what I've shared over the last maybe number of sessions, which is the Prophet ﷺ's planning in the first 2 years. And we talked about building the masjid, and we talked about the concept of al-mu'akhah, and we talked about the constitution, and naming the city and actually building the infrastructure for this new country. And I went over a number of points that are miscellaneous in that whole vision that he was building, alayhi salatu wasalam. And we talked about adhan last time, and I still have 2 more points I want to point out, and then I'll move on, inshallah ta'ala. Another occurrence that took place within those first 2 years that was important was the concept of the mimbar. And I use that as my anchor example, but really what I'm talking about is Jumu'ah. I'm talking about the concept of Jumu'ah. This to us is so what is one of the pitfalls of the human experience, like in general, outside of religion, is just things that occur with no break, meaning the pattern that keeps on happening, you stop thinking about it. Like you take it for granted, it becomes a maxim, and you stop even thinking about it, and just accept it being there. And this is like a huge pitfall for human beings in general. Whatever you're doing, whether it's studying or it's work or with your family or with your relationships, whatever it is, it's the stuff that are always happening that you tend to stop noticing. You start taking for granted, you don't appreciate well, and you mess up in the long run. Like it ends up being completely messed up because you just stop being able to see what they are until Allah samahAllah is taken away from you. Or you're threatened to lose them, and then you suddenly realize, oh my God, this is very important, so you start taking time to look at it, and hopefully you're smart enough to realize and acknowledge and recognize how beautiful these things are before they're taken away from you. And that's what the Quran is huge about. The Quran is like the #1 book that just does that. It tells you, can you please notice that which is always occurring around you, and the example for it, obviously, or the clear and strong example, is the Quran asking you time and time again to observe and contemplate the sun and the moon and the movement of the earth and the mountains and the rivers and the water coming down to the earth and the earth bringing green and them dying again and then resurrecting again. And these things we just take for granted because that's life. That's life. Things die and they live again and they die and they live again. And that's how life is. And we don't really think about it. We don't contemplate that. But that's really technically what exactly we're supposed to be thinking about and contemplating. And we know that in our own lives. Because, for example, you have your parents around, and they're there. So every day you see your parents, and whatever, like they're there. And then somehow you lose one, and then it hits you so hard, and you start you regret so much, and then you actually start having the ability to treasure the one that's left. And so the Quran is trying to get us to notice these things before you lose them. And the example that I have for us from this part of the story is the concept of Jumu'ah. We take it for granted, that's the norm. Friday, you're going to go find a masjid and pray Jumu'ah. And we take it it's a part of our lives, and we just stick. Jumu'ah was a huge, huge social change that he brought, alayhi salatu wasalam. Just think about before, that Jumu'ah wasn't a thing. Just prayed Dhuhr, if you had time, pray Dhuhr. And then he came, alayhi salatu wasalam, and the Quran came and said, no, There's going to be, from now on the day of Jumu'ah specifically, right, chosen by God himself, Dhuhr Salah is going to be different. It's going to be mandatory for all men residing in a certain area to come and pray. Women are welcome, but it's mandatory for men to come. Whatever it is you're doing, you drop and you go. So the ayah says, إِذَا نُودِيَ لِلصَّلَاةِ مِنْ يَوْمِ الْجُمُعَةِ فَاسْعَوْا إِلَى ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. And you hear the calling, you go to وَذَرُوا الْبَيْعَ. You're selling, you're buying, like it's your livelihood. Al-bay'a is how you make a living. You're making a living. You stop, you go pray Jumu'ah. You're not told to do that for the Asr of Yawm al-Khamis, right? You're not told to do that Isha on the day of Tuesday. No. If you come, ahlan wa sahlan. It's good, it's khair, it's barakah, you benefit. But you're not told to drop what you're doing and come. But Jumu'ah, no. Everyone drop, be there. And it's not a normal prayer. No, we're going to remove 2 rak'ah out of the 4. And instead of 2 rak'ahs, someone's is going to address you. It's not going to be any person. Now it is. Today it is. Today it's just any person. But back then, it's going to be the leader. The Prophet ﷺ himself will address you. And then after he moves on, ﷺ, it will be all the leaders. And if he sent people to go reside somewhere else, the person who would give their khutbah would be their leader. The person who was responsible for making decisions, like the top of the pyramid in any hierarchical structure, political or may it be, or social, that's the person who's going to actually do the Jumu'ah. So he started this concept, alayhi salatu wasalam. He founded this system that was going to ensure that wherever Muslims are on the planet, whatever time within history it is, no matter how few of them there are, they're going to figure out a way to establish this ritual so that they will have some form of leadership amongst them. This is what Jumu'ah was. This was a big deal because it changed the way that community functioned. Like the way the community that he had was going to function from now on was different because of this installment, of this one day a week where everyone has to show up. If you didn't show up, you're either traveling, sick, or dead. If you're neither, there's nothing. You have to be there. If you're a part of the Muslim Ummah and you're in this, you have to be attending. No excuses. And this was a big deal because this allowed the Prophet ﷺ to not only know who he has in his community, but also address them with next steps in a way that is formal and continuous and repetitive and allows for a sequential form of learning that was going to happen for the Sahaba who were going to attend this. It was a big deal. How does an ummah get lost if every week they gather once with their leader and they hear where they're going? Like here's what's happened over the last week and here's what the next steps are going to look like, right? It's impossible. It's impossible. It's actually not. I don't understand. It's one of the enigmas of reality for me, for the Muslim ummah. How we manage to be where we are when we have this tool, right? It's not like Sundays for. It's not the same thing, by the way. Like for Christians and Jews, Sunday and Saturday are not the same as Jumu'ah. They're not. We're not told actually the sunnah on the day of Jumu'ah is that you work. It's not to take the day off. It's actually makruh in all 4 schools of jurisprudence, all 4 of them. It's makruh to take Friday fully off. You understand? It's makruh. Like the way that the Saturday and Sunday work for the other faiths, that you can't work that day. You're not allowed to work. It was a day, and they have these weird beliefs of God taking a day off. La, Jalla Jalalullah, wa hasha lillah. None of that. For us as Muslims, you're not supposed to have Jumu'ah off. You should be working Yawm al-Jumu'ah. It's just when Jumu'ah happens, you stop, you go attend Jumu'ah, then you go back again. So actually, you're living the sunnah in this country more than we would back in the Middle East, and we know that. All of my shuyukh would preach this time and time again that Jumu'ah shouldn't be off, like it shouldn't be the day off. Take if you're going to give people time off from governmental work or in ways to protect the employee from the abuse of the employer, and you give them 2 days out of 7 off. Don't make it Friday. Friday people should get up and go to work, and then when it's Jumu'ah time, they go attend Jumu'ah and they come back and they continue their day and then they go home. Or they end their day with Jumu'ah, or however you want to look at it. And that's why the ayah doesn't say, the ayah says, إِذَا نُودِيَ وَذَرُوا الْبَيْعَ. The ayah in Surah Al-Jumu'ah is assuming that you're working, that you're selling and buying, and it's Jumu'ah time, so you drop and you go. فَإِذَا قُضِيَتِ الصَّلَاةُ When salah is over, فَانْتَشِرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَابْتَغُوا مِنْ فَضْلِ اللَّهِ Disperse into the earth and go and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from His fadl. I mean, continue to work and make your living and do what you need to do. وَاذْكُرُوا and now someone has reminded you of God and given you like some direction, and do that with the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you're not supposed to stay home all day. That's actually not the point of it. But it was a system to make sure that the community always had direction, that they would never get lost. Now, this has been completely butchered overseas in majority Muslim countries by corrupt political regimes. Completely butchered. Where the khatib gets on the minbar and there's a piece of paper that he has to read because the awqaf sent it to him, and this has been approved by political leadership, and he just stands there and he reads that's why people, Allah ma rahima rabbi, in certain places, but this is the majority of what's happening in the Middle East, and I grew up there, and this is not based on hearsay, I witnessed this. In this country, we don't have that problem. We actually don't have that problem. Meaning, Jumu'ah can be treated as it was. And I'm using the example of the minbar. Because the Prophet ﷺ, when he started speaking, he started speaking in the masjid just up front. Just here. It's like the masjid, as I told you, of the Prophet ﷺ was no bigger than the place that we're sitting in. This is actually a very good example of how it was. Almost same space, there's no barriers, and women would listen, everyone was in the masjid. The Prophet, the doors were better, but this is it's similar. And the Prophet ﷺ would stand up front and give the khutbah. And then people started sitting outside of the boundaries of the masjid because so many people were attending. So people would sit outside, and they couldn't see him or hear him anymore, alayhi salatu wasalam, because he was standing on the same level. So they built a minbar. But before they did, the Prophet alayhi salatu would stand and hold on to a branch. There was a tree in the front part of the masjid. I want you to imagine the masjid of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. There's a tree right up front here. An actual tree, not like an actual tree. And the tree had a few branches. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, when he gave his khutbah, he would stand and he'd hold on to the branch. He would put an arm on the branch and speak, and then sit down, and then stand up again and do the same thing. He did this for the first year or more. And then the Sahaba said, we need to get you a little bit up higher so that people can hear you. فَبَنَوْا فَاتَّخَذُوا لَهُ مِنْبَرًا. So they made a minbar for him, alayhi salatu. They built it out of wood with 3 steps. He would go up 3 steps and stand, alayhi salatu wasalam. And this narration that I'm going to share with you has nothing to do with what I've been talking about in terms of leadership and all that other stuff. It's just a really beautiful narration that I want you to hear. It is narrated by at least 8 different Sahaba, and it's in all the books, all the collections of hadith. It's a very authentic narration, and it comes in different forms in different ways, with different additions to each narration. But they all agree to the following: that the Prophet ﷺ, on the day that they made the minbar for him, ﷺ, and when the Jumu'ah, right after that he was going to use it, قال فصعد النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم منبره. So he goes up his minbar for the first time. قال فما أن التفت عليه الصلاة والسلام. The moment he turned and started to speak, قال سمعنا صوتا كصوت العجل كبكاء العجل. If you ever heard a calf, like a cry? You have to have like a farm or worked at a farm at some point in your life. But animals, like babies, like human babies, will make sounds that are similar to crying. Yeah? So they heard a sound as if a calf was crying, a calf was screaming, a young bull or a young camel. Yeah? فقال فالتفت الناس. People were looking around to see who brought their camel or their cow to the masjid, because they heard it. قال فنظرنا فإذا بالصوت يخرج من جذع النخل. And we looked, and what we found, and the sound was coming from the branch that the Prophet ﷺ used to stand beside. قال فعلى الصوت. And the sound became very loud to the point that people couldn't hear what he was saying عليه الصلاة والسلام. قال فنزل من منبره عليه الصلاة والسلام. He got down the minbar. قال ثم ذهب إلى الجذع. He goes over to the branch. قال فمسح عليه. And he started to stroke the branch. قال يقول له كلاما. He's saying, and he's whispering something to the branch. قال حتى هدأ الجذع. Until the jidh' stopped making the noise. فقالوا يا رسول الله ما هذا? O Prophet of Allah, what is this? What just happened? فقال لقد حن الجذع لما كان يحصل عنده من ذكر الله. The jidh' was upset that it's losing what used to occur at its site from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning it was upset that it's no longer the host of all of what the Prophet ﷺ used to teach and he used to say, and now he's going to be standing over there, and it's left and forgotten. So it began to cry. It made a physical noise. يقولون فما كنت تقول يا رسول الله. What were you saying? فقال قلت لها أو قلت للجذع اصبر وتكون معي في الجنة. Be patient and you will be with me in Jannah. يقول ولو لم أعده بذاك فوالله لحن وأن إلى يوم القيامة. And if I did not tell him this, he would have made this noise until the day of judgment. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. A branch of a tree he felt the absence of his presence, alayhi salatu wasalam, and made a physical noise that the people who were attending Jum'ah. This hadith, the reason that it's authentic is because it happened on Friday. The masjid was full. Everyone witnessed it. All of the Sahaba were saying they witnessed this. And that's why it's narrated to us through all these different people who just pointed, and they do with different wordings for it because of what they saw, because they heard the sound of it. At the time of Sayyidina Umar al-Khattab, he had to remove it. No one knows where it is, because people would come and it became its own thing. Like the jidha later years after, it became its own thing. People would come, this is the jidha. It was getting a little bit too much. Human beings unfortunately have this bad habit of sometimes going overboard. So Sayyidina Umar had to remove it, had to be removed and hidden. And no one knows where it was hidden after Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab did this, out of the fact that people were starting to misuse the interpretation of what happened. But that's the story of his mimbar, alayhi salatu wasalam. The jidha, missed him, alayhi salatu wasalam. But that mimbar is one of the reasons that his ummah was the way it was. And this mimbar is the reason that the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ, for a millennium after he passed away, was able to maintain its own. It's how Muslim communities function. If we don't bring back the functionality of Yawm al-Jumu'ah and the mimbar of Jumu'ah again into our communities, then we will continue to struggle. When we talk about leadership in communities, in Muslim communities, our problem is not lack of people who do have leadership skills. It's not lack of, no, we have all of that. And we have, what's more important is a day where everyone, I'm on a number of boards in community. Do you understand how hard it is to get everyone into a room for a meeting? It's one of the things that make me consider walking in front of a bus on a ride. I could just end this whole thing now. There's no need to continue to. It's impossible to get people into a room. 7 men just for a meeting once a mustahi. It's impossible. Everyone has something to do. Everyone is busy. You have to spend like a month just trying to get people into a room. Then you have Jumu'ah. Everyone comes to Jumu'ah, right? Everyone comes to Jumu'ah. The Prophet ﷺ had a weekly meeting, whether they liked it or not, organized by God himself. Organized by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They all had to come. So he didn't struggle ﷺ with getting people into a room to hear what the next steps are going to be. And then after Jumu'ah, obviously people would come to him ﷺ, Ya Rasulullah, so what does that mean? So what do we do? Whether he needed funds ﷺ to build something or to fund something. Whether ﷺ needed more people to volunteer for Saraya. Whether he needed people to volunteer for opening their homes for those who Ahlul Suffah. Whatever he needed ﷺ, or whatever the challenge was, wherever there was mashura that was required, happened right after Jumu'ah on the day of Friday. And that's, if you think about it, and if you understand how difficult it is to run anything, especially when human beings are involved, he just removed alayhi salatu wasalam, the way this works, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removed for us the biggest burden of all, which is getting everyone in a room. Just make sure everyone is not just in a room, but they're all listening. You can't really be discussing stuff in the middle of Jumu'ah, now can you? Right? And it's very abnormal for you to start yelling at the Imam in the middle of Jumu'ah. It happens here and there, but it's not supposed to, and we know that, right? So the Prophet ﷺ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken care of that for him. He's assembled his community for him, and they're going to listen, so he can actually say something that's meaningful. And then after Jumu'ah, people have the chance to actually come and talk about this. This is how things were this is how he was so efficient. This is how it was so effective. The Jumu'ah. And a lot of the time I think about this when we talk about meetings, like, do we not pray Jumu'ah? And then half an hour after Jumu'ah you meet, you get your things done, and you move on. But of course there's 100 masjid and 100 timings, so everyone's praying a Jumu'ah at a different place and a different time, so we ruined it again. You understand that, technically speaking, if you were to take a faqih from 1,000 years ago, from any of the schools of jurisprudence, Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, Hanbali, or even Zahiri or others, like the stuff that don't exist anymore, and ask them about the setup that we have for Jumu'ah, they would say it's all wrong. It's absolutely all wrong. You're not allowed to have more than one spot for Jumu'ah in one city. You're not. Unless there is a physical problem, meaning the community is too poor to actually buy a place that's big enough for everyone to pray in it. So they're forced to take more than one spot. They're forced, and the place is too big. So It's too far. The city that they're in has become so big that people at the end of the city physically can't make it to this masjid, so you have to have two. So when you talk about another Jumu'ah in a masjid or a Jumu'ah in the city, then you're talking about something that's extremely dangerous. It's a big deal. And if it's not appropriately done, then it could be batil. It could be completely invalid, and it could be unacceptable. So this concept that we have in this community where every couple of, it's like, I don't know, it's like we spawn a Jumu'ah every week in a different spot. Like the more I look at it, there's like 1 million Jumu'ahs running. I don't understand. No, it should be technically, and I'm for it. And if we all agree, I'll close the Jumu'ah that I have here down, and I'll go attend with everyone else. It's one. You got one Jumu'ah. Two if needed, if you absolutely cannot fit everybody. But we don't have that problem. We don't lack funds and wealth to do it. We lack some degree of willingness to do it, and we lack any form of unity to do it. But the truth of the matter is that when it comes to this issue specifically, you can have musallayat, you can have masajid. People pray Isha, and it's closer to their homes. When it comes to Jumu'ah, no. It defeats the purpose of Jumu'ah if there's 1 million of them. It defeats the purpose of Jumu'ah if there's a lot of them. There's no point anymore. The community has no leadership. Unless all of the khutaba have a union, or they come to, they agree beforehand, and there's a specific message that has been agreed upon by the leadership of the community that's going to be dispersed and given and administered during that khutbah. Aside from that, then this is all, I'm telling you, I'm a khatib. It's all wrong. This is all wrong. Everything about it is completely wrong. It's not right. I don't like it. I don't agree with it. I've been talking out against it since I came here. I don't like it at all, because we have nothing to blame here. Like if you go back to the Middle East, there's a lot of hindrances for people to actually establish it appropriately. They don't have, but we have nothing here. There's no hindrance here. This is just an issue of people not wanting to work with each other. They just want to have their own little silos. It's more entertaining for them that way. But Jumu'ah is not built for that. Jumu'ah is an issue of leadership, not a ritual. You could pray dhuhr. Actually, if you're traveling to another city and it's Jumu'ah time, do you have to go pray Jumu'ah? No. And for the numbers, so for example, the Shafi'iyya need 40 people, right? You need 40 people to attend Jumu'ah. In order for there to be Jumu'ah, you have 40 people. So if there's 39 and you're a traveler, you come in, you don't count. You don't count. It has to be 40 people who are residing. Because it's not about the ritual. The ritual is, there's dhuhr. This is about a different thing. This is about the community having some form of organization and having some form of leadership so they can actually make decisions and take steps and move forward. And the way it is right now, it's not like that. It's not. And that has to at some point change if we're going to. Because he built, for me, one of the accomplishments of those first 2 years for the Prophet ﷺ was establishing the mimbar. This mimbar here. This is his mimbar ﷺ. It's no one else's. Anyone who stands there, they stand on behalf of Muhammad ﷺ. It's a big deal. To give khutbah, you have to be approved by at least 3 of your scholars to do it. Some people send me sometimes, oh, we don't have a khatib. So, we need a khatib. No. See, that's not how this works. You have a khatib, then you have a khutbah. If you don't have a khatib, then you don't have a khutbah. It's like you have a khutbah, but you need a khatib. That's insane. That's crazy. That makes no sense at all. Within the way Islam is built, you don't understand what Jumu'ah is. Like, I'm going to establish a Jumu'ah and they go look for a khatib. No. You need a khatib. You need someone who has some form of leadership in your community to actually give the khutbah. For you to actually, let me give you one more. This is my last piece of the rant, and then I'll move on. I promise I'll move on. It's actually not sunnah, and it's not permissible for you to bring speakers from outside the city to give Jumu'ahs. They can give halaqat, they can give durus, but not Jumu'ah. The Jumu'ah has to be given by someone who is a leader in the community. This person that you brought from outside is a traveler. He's a traveler. He can't give Jumu'ah. You can't. This is why I don't do this. Every week there's someone, can I come into this city? No. No. I'll come and give you a lecture maybe 5 years from now when I have time. But no, definitely not Jumu'ah. Definitely not Jumu'ah. I'm not. Based on what do I get on your mimbar and speak to you? I don't know anyone here. I have no idea what their problems are. Based on what? This is in books of fiqh. I'm not making. Go look for this. If you don't believe me, go look for this. Go learn. Read yourself. You'll see it. You'll find it written in the book. That a khatib should not be traveling and coming from outside to give. No. They can give durus, but the khutbah should be from the person on the inside. It was the Khalifa and the Wali that gave the khutbahs back in the day. And if they didn't because they couldn't, then the scholar who gave it, the residing scholar who gave it after consulting with them. to understand what's coming next. What are we doing? Where are we going? What's the problem? And it's a security valve, because it's a way to make sure that everyone behaves. Because if you don't behave, then there's a possibility that on the minbar your name will be called out. And your mistake will be pointed out, so you have to behave if you want to get. Same thing goes for the leadership. The minbar had power. It had real power. It kept society, it kept everyone in line. It made sure that oppressions could not happen, that transgressions could not occur without that being exposed somewhere. So people, they feared Jumu'ah, because Jumu'ah was like al-qada, was like the judiciary system. It was immune, it was protected, so that the voice of truth, so that justice and freedom could be administered there. So that people, and it was a way to keep the society. Today, of course, they've infiltrated that. So khalas, the khatib is only, it has to be, and he has to stand there with the paper. And the moment he doesn't read from the paper, you don't see him again for a couple of months. He's gone for a while. He comes back later on, and he sticks to the paper. And it's a problem that we have elsewhere. We don't have it here. It would be nice if Muslims if we learned really what it is that what we have, the systems that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have given us, and how to use them appropriately. The last piece that I want to talk about him establishing alayhi salatu wasalam in these 2 years was al-jaysh. He established an army. There was an army. An army was required. See, in Mecca, no such thing. In Mecca, they weren't allowed to bear arms. They weren't allowed to carry swords at all. No matter how horrifically they were oppressed, even if they were oppressed physically, even if they were going to be killed, they weren't allowed to fight back with weaponry, ever. But now it's different. The Prophet ﷺ has established a country. This country needs to be protected. And that requires an army. So he started building an army, alayhi salatu wasalam, and providing training and getting people in the right positions to lead it, so that when it's needed, they can go and, because he knew alayhi salatu wasalam what was going to come. You think the neighboring tribes and neighboring cities and Quraysh are going to allow him alayhi salatu wasalam to build a city and change the norms of society? No. And so he knew that alayhi salatu wasalam, which is why the army was a big need. And to fund the protection of the city required obviously a lot of work. At the beginning, maybe in the first 2 years, the Prophet ﷺ had less than 1,000 people who could bear arms. There was less than 1,000. So you're talking about maybe 700, 800 people tops who can bear arms, who can actually carry a weapon and go into battle. Because you can't take children, and you can't force women, and you can't force, obviously, the agreement with the tribes of al-Yahud and the tribes of the Mushrikeen that were living in Yathrib, in Medina, is that they didn't have to go. They would have to offer something. They'd have to help with some of the weaponry, and they had to stay in the city and protect the city, but they never had to go out and meet an enemy. That the Prophet ﷺ did not force, and they didn't have to. They were absolved from being a part of the military if they didn't want to join. If they wanted to join, they could, and some of them did. His armies ﷺ would have people from Medina who were not Muslim. They were there. Numbers were very small, but they were there because they were not forced to do this. But they were forced to keep the city safe and to help fund the army. And this obviously was a big step from him ﷺ at the time. And this rocked the boat within Jazeera very heavily. So these are the things I wanted to share with you that occurred, technically speaking, within the first 2 years of him arriving in Medina ﷺ, establishing this new country. These are pictures that I shared with you last time of the Masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. This is an example of what it looked like. Those houses that you see over there beside the Masjid are the houses of the Prophet ﷺ's wives, and he would there's a door right into the Masjid from his home ﷺ, as you can see. And this is technically what the I'm going to share this with you in a bit more detail when we come to the Battle of Al-Khandaq. I'll use this picture and I'll point out for you certain things, getting a sense of what the city looked like during the time of the Prophet ﷺ is of some degree of importance. This is just not a very good resolution picture, so I'll do this in a different time, inshallah ta'ala. All right, so let's talk about this for a second, because this is important. Never ever, as a Muslim, should you feel ashamed or embarrassed of this word or what this word means. You have absolutely no reason to. The word jihad is an extremely important concept within Islam, and it's something that you should be very proud of, actually. The concept of jihad is to strive. That's what it means in Arabic, to strive against a difficulty. And jihad comes in many different forms. one of those forms is called combat. One of those forms is called qital, one of them. The majority of different forms of jihad are not combat. And actually, they're more difficult. Yani. The jihad of al-ma'siyah, when you strive against sin, or jihad al-ta'a, when you strive to hold on to good deeds, or jihad al-nafs, when you strive against the nafs, the soul that you have on the inside. All of these types of striving are happening all the time, and the concept of jihad is an umbrella term that encompasses all of these. But if we're going to use the term to describe combat, which is correct, obviously, in many situations, there's nothing that you should feel uncomfortable about. And I know today it's much easier than maybe 10 years ago. 10 years ago, or more, or 15 years ago, closer, the word itself caused people to feel very uncomfortable. And scholars and speakers in the West and in the East would stay away from the word after after it was reclaimed from us, after it was taken away. After this word was completely removed from our vocabulary and taken away from us and we couldn't use it anymore, Muslims, thankfully, over the last decade, have reclaimed the word and brought it back to where it belongs within our faith. ذِرْوَةُ سِنَامِ الْأَمْرِ الْجِهَادِ. The peak, the pinnacle of being a Muslim is being in a state of jihad, in a state of striving, ongoing striving. You're always pushing. You're always trying to be better. You're always trying to improve things. You're standing up against that which is trying to push you backwards. You are pushing against that which is trying to take away from you your identity or what it is that you stand for or you believe in. And that comes in many, many forms. You do that with your tongue. You do that with your heart, with your mind, with your pen. And you do that also with your hands when you need to. Majority of you sitting here, myself included, in our lives, our jihad will not be in the form of combat. The majority of people sitting here, it's not going to be in that form. And alhamdulillah, that's the case. The Prophet ﷺ would tell the Sahaba verbatim, لا تتمنوا لقاء العدو. Never hope for war. Never hope for combat. Never wish it on yourself. Never say, inshallah, never. ولكن سألوا الله العافية. Ask Allah for afiyah, for wellness. And the other forms of jihad, do them. They're easier. And they're less, when your life's on the line, it's a different conversation altogether. Your jihad is going to be through knowledge, through seeking of knowledge and through distributing of knowledge. Your jihad is going to be through your character, through your advocacy, through your ability to work, to collaborate and to cooperate with people around you. Your jihad is going to be bringing back and uniting a divided ummah. Is uniting an ummah that's been divided for a long time and strengthening the core of that ummah. That's your jihad. It's very hard. It's very difficult. Those are the first 13 years of his life, alayhi salatu wasalam, as a prophet. But there was combat, obviously, during his life, because as a country, his existence, alayhi salatu wasalam, the existence of the Sahaba was being threatened time and time again. There were 29 battles in total. Okay? 29 in total, all together. If you put everything, even the ones that he didn't attend, alayhi salatu wasalam, the Saraya, put it all together, 29 battles. That's it. All together, the number of people who died was somewhere around 400. That's it. And I'm giving you the numbers that are exaggerated. Like I'm taking from the books that gave the highest number, I'm putting the highest number for you. Most of the books see numbers much lower than that. Because the numbers who were fighting were much lower. And we know in Badr, in Ma'rakat Badr, from the Muslims only 14 people passed, and 70 from the Mushrikeen. On Uhud, it was 70 of the Muslims and a similar number from the Mushrikeen. The small numbers who passed, who actually died in combat. 400 in total from both sides in all the battles. If we remove Mu'tah specifically, because we don't know exactly what happened on the other side. Like for Mu'tah specifically, we don't know the number of those who died from the Roman army at that day. It's just we don't have proper numbers for it. So the numbers are very low. And the reason that he did this, alayhi salatu wasalam, because of this phrase that you read up there in Arabic. This is a phrase that you should keep with you and always remember when you're talking about his seerah, alayhi salatu wasalam. What was he asking for? He was asking for this. خَلُّوا بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَ النَّاسِ. Let me speak to people. Let me explain Islam to people. Allow people to make their decision about whether they want to believe or not. Don't hold your sword over their heads, and don't continue to threaten me when I try to speak. All I'm asking is for the ability to talk about this. If they don't want it, then they don't want it. لا إكراه في الدين. There is no space in Islam for coercion. It's not even talked about. We don't want anyone to accept Islam if they don't want to accept it. What's the point? You just create a munafiq. You don't need a munafiq. You don't want to accept this. Fine, don't accept it. Do whatever you want, but allow us the ability to at least present it to you. Let me explain the logic behind it, why this is important. And then if you don't want it, you're fine. Quraysh said no. You don't have the right to believe what you believe. You don't have the right to speak to people. And people don't have the right to accept it. And that's transgression against people's fundamental rights. There's a fundamental human right that was taken away. You're not allowed to speak. No, you're not allowed to be a Muslim. You're not allowed to speak to people about it, and they can't accept Islam. What he was asking for, خَلُّوا بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَ النَّاسِ. Allow me, stop putting yourself between me and people. I want to speak to people. That's it. That's why I'm going to show you a graph maybe a couple of months from now, where I'll show you how the number of Muslims kind of grumbled along. Like it was a graph where it's just basically, sometimes even plateauing for a year, a few people, and then there's a moment where the graph goes like this. It just rockets up, right? And then I'll ask you, what happened there? And then you'll say, it was Sulh Hudaybiyah. It was when the Treaty of Hudaybiyah was signed, when there was peace, when they stopped fighting. When there was an agreement that no more war, if you wanted to accept Islam, you can go ahead and do it. If you didn't want to do it, you didn't have to. And the numbers of Muslims went from 1,400 to 10,000 within a year. Within a year. Because the Prophet ﷺ was able to speak. And people weren't scared. The Prophet ﷺ would sometimes come to people and talk to them about Islam, and they would listen to it. And they would, yes, it makes sense, but no, I don't want to get in trouble with Quraysh. I have all these treaties. I don't want to get in trouble. Maybe إذا ظهرت على الكعبة. Once you become stronger, then we'll enter. A lot of people would say this to him, literally. They would actually say that. We'll accept Islam once you become more powerful, but right now, no. And this is why the battles actually occurred. So keep that in mind. Another occurrence that happened during this second year, which I think is something really, really, really beautiful. And this happened right before the first battle occurred. And it was a little bit of it was a reminder to the Prophet ﷺ and to Muslims about a certain thing, about what the goal was, in case they forgot. Now, the Muslims up to this moment that I've been talking to you for a couple of months now about his life, ﷺ and his seerah. Up to this moment in his life, when they pray Isha or Fajr, they would face that way. Well, not really, because we're in Canada, so we would just face kind of that way a little bit. But but if this was his masjid, ﷺ, and this was the Qibla, they were facing the opposite direction. They were praying to the north. And they were praying to the north. Why? Because the Qibla was in Masjid al-Aqsa. It was towards Al-Quds. That was the Qibla. So when they built the masjid, they roofed the northern part, because that's where they were going to be praying up front, because they were towards the north. Yeah. And the Prophet ﷺ, part of him always wished it wasn't there, and that it was the Kaaba, because the Kaaba is the first house of worship that was ever established on the planet. The one who built the Kaaba was Adam ﷺ and his wife Hawa. And I did a long series on this before Hajj in the previous year. The Malaika came and told Adam about the house that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants him to establish. And they would help him with the rocks, and Hawa would carry them. And Sayyidina Adam ﷺ would build the Kaaba, and he performed the first tawaf, alayhi salatu wasalam. And we have evidence in our sunnah that the Nuh alayhi salam performed Hajj, and that Musa alayhi salam performed Hajj, and that Yunus alayhi salam performed Hajj from all the prophets. So this area, this space that we talk about in Mecca is sacred, and it's as original as any space will ever be, because it goes back to the beginning of the story of the human race. So the Prophet ﷺ loved that piece, and he wished that this Islam as a faith would be redirected to the origins of the story, rather than something that happened years later. Al-Aqsa was built a number of years later. Obviously, it's a sacred space as well, but he always wanted to go back. So the ayah would come and say, قَدْ نَرَى تَقَلُّبَ وَجْهِكَ فِي السَّمَاءِ. We see the way that you look at the sky every once in a while with a thought, but then you don't say anything. تَقَلُّبَ وَجْهِكَ, meaning you look up and then you look down again. Like you look up if you want to say something and you don't say something. We see you looking up with a thought and then saying, no, I can't ask for that. فَلَنُوَلِّيَنَّكَ قِبْلَةً تَرْضَاهَا. We're going to give you a direction, a qibla, that you will be satisfied and happy with. فَوَلِّ وَجْهَكَ شَطْرَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ. So turn your face towards the Bayt al-Haram, to the Kaaba. وَحَيْثُ مَا كُنْتُمْ. And wherever you may be on this planet, فَوَلُّوا وُجُوهَكُمْ شَطْرَهُ. Then always look for where it is and then face. يَا أَخِي وَيَا أُخْتِي. You go in any place on the planet, wherever, anywhere. What you do is you stand and you look, where's the Kaaba? Where is it from here? And you start thinking, you look at the sun, you look at the moon, you look at the stars, you take out your phone, you put on the app, you look for it. And then you figure out where the Kaaba is, and then you direct yourself towards your Qibla. This keeps you grounded, and this keeps you focused. If you have direction, if you know where you're going, if you know what direction you're facing, then wherever you are on this earth, you will always be properly oriented. You'll never be lost. Even if someone stands you and twists you around 100 times until you're woozy and dizzy, in a moment you'll figure out where your direction is. Where's the Kaaba? That's my direction. That's what this whole thing is about. It's about the human story. It's about the human race. It's about the house that Adam built, that he built for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The concept of a house that brings us all together. The house is where we come together, is where we unite, is where we find love, is where we find the support and the aid and the closeness and the calmness and the peace that we look for in the world. It's that house that unites us all, that returns us back to our Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why I'm living, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to bring people back to that. I'm trying to make sure that everyone in the world understands where they came from, why they're here, and what their direction is. And that's how Muslims never get lost. Like as a Muslim, you should never be lost in life. You should never be walking around aimlessly. No, you have a qibla. You have a direction. That's what qibla means. You know where you face. You know what direction you're standing in front. You stand and you put you know when you do this in salah? This is what you do during Umrah and Hajj. When you perform Umrah, you go and you stand and you put yourself right beside Al-Hajar al-Aswad. And you turn towards it. And you say, Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. And then you go around. And then you come to it again, Allahu Akbar, you do the 7 tawaf, and then I stand here in London, Ontario, Canada, and I put my hand up towards the Kaaba and I say Allahu Akbar from here. And it's the same thing, it's the same effect, it's the same concept, same idea. And people all around the globe, they find their direction of the Kaaba and they say, to the best of their ability, and they put their hands forward and say Allahu Akbar. This is taslim. This is in Arabic culture, when you put your hands like this is showing that I'm not harmful. It's taslim, meaning I'm showing you that I'm with you. I accept everything that you say and that you teach. I have no objections. This is the movement that the Arab would do. You put your hand up. Even now, if someone puts a gun, what do? Hands up. You surrender. I surrender. That's what it is. You're surrendering to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the direction, to the house that started it all, the origin of everything. Where Adam alayhi salam, your father and your mother, they built that because their Lord told them so, and that's where we all come from. That's where it all started. So you stand and you surrender to your direction, and you continue to accept it for what it is. It's a beautiful thing in our deen. And the fact that the Prophet alayhi salam was, you say, well, why didn't you start that way? No. This has to happen. This had to happen in his life. This redirection had to happen. This redirection in the middle of his life alayhi salam had to happen. No. All right, you've been doing this as the prophets before you. Now redirect. Now redirect to the origin of all of it. Now go back to the authenticity, to the authentic direction that all the human race, all of humanity should understand and should recognize and acknowledge and appreciate. And the masjid you see up there is called Masjid al-Qiblatayn. He was praying there, alayhi salatu wasalam. The narrations in Tabaqat ibn Sa'd and others as well, where the Prophet ﷺ was praying, and Jibreel ﷺ would come in wahi during salah and recite upon him this verse here. قَدْ أَرَى تَقَلُّبَ وَجْهِكَ فِي السَّمَاءِ. We see you're wondering and looking up to the sky with something in you want to say but you're not saying it. فَلَنُوَلِّيَنَّكَ. We're going to give you the qibla that you want. فَوَلِّ وَجْهَكَ. Turn your face. So he turned ﷺ in the middle of salah. In the middle of salah, he would turn around and the Sahaba would turn around with him. They go 180 in the middle of salah. The next Fajr, he would send, during that day, alayhi would send out the people to tell all the other masajid. There's a lot of masajid. In Medina, a lot of musallayat were built for people to pray. Jumu'ah happened in one place. It happened in Masjid al-Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam. Jumu'ah happened in one place, but salah happened in many places. So the people of Quba didn't know yet. So they also had to do that in Fajr. The person who because it takes a while to get to Quba. So the Prophet ﷺ sent someone. He got there during the time of Fajr for the Sahaba. And he said, نَزَلَ عَلَى رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ كَذَا وَكَذَا مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ. He recited the Quran. So the people there turned 180. And so and it happened like that as a form of redirection. Know where you're going. Ya akhi, know what you stand for. You have direction. You can never come to, as a Muslim, I absolutely refuse for you to come and say, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. What do you mean? You have a direction, you have a qibla, you pray towards it 5 times a day. What do you mean you're lost? There's no such thing. I can understand it from someone who has not been directed, who does not have a faith. But anta Muslim, as a Muslim, you can't say that. What do you mean you're lost, and you're aimless, and you're purposeless? Of course you're not. You have a qibla. You face it every single day. It reminds you, it grounds you, it redirects you every time of what you're living for and where you're going and what your energy should be focused towards serving. It's serving the legacy of that house, the legacy of Bayt al-Haram and what it means. And that happened right before things started to get heated. Up till now, in the first 2 years, things are going swimmingly. It's going pretty nice. Have like 12, 13 masajid that are built, a lot of Quran that's been revealed, people are praying, paying zakah, siyam, Ramadan. It's nice, everything is being established, there's a lot of education, mentoring, people are actually moving out of the homes that they were living in. Medina is starting to flourish a bit, there's a law, there's rule, there's wars, no wars. Aus and Khazraj haven't fought for 2 years, no blood, things are going really nicely. It had like, the homesickness that the Sahaba had kind of worn off. The physical illness that they all had when they moved to the new city has started to go away. People started to feel better. They were planting trees. They were building up. Things started to work. It was nice. It was nice. First year in 8-9 months, it was going pretty well. Yeah, but nothing stays like that forever. The Prophet ﷺ, when this redirection happened, he started to take some initiatives. He took a few initiatives, alayhi salatu wasalam. The reason being is that, and the reason why I'm saying this, he's like, well, why are you saying that? It's very easy to get comfortable. It's very easy in life to get comfortable. Have a nice job, nice house, nice car, friends, a masjid, everything is nice. You come in, you pray, you sit, you socialize, you go, everything is nice. It's easy to get comfortable. It's easy to get comfortable and stop thinking about what actually needs to be done. It's easy for us as Muslims in the West to stop caring about the status of our ummah. It's easy for us to stop caring about that. It's easy to start saying, khalas ya akhi. You've given us a headache, ummah this and ummah that, ya akhi. Go see your mother if you miss your go see your mother if you miss ummah this and ummah. It's easy to start feeling, why are you talking to us about this all the time? Because we can't afford. Because we can't. You don't have the, it's not an option. It's not an option for me as a Muslim to get comfortable in my situation. The Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, they were starting to get, this is nice, life is getting better, we're trying to make money again, we're surrounded by Muslims, we're not in a minority anymore. My neighbors are Muslims, we all pray Fajr every morning, we can learn from we're spending time with Rasulullah ﷺ. What more do they want? Really, what more could they want? I don't blame them. I don't blame them. If I was living in the city where I got to see the Prophet ﷺ a couple of times a day, I wouldn't want much more. I wouldn't have much more than I was looking forward to. Just keep as is, status quo. Don't touch anything. No. He knew that there was a job that needed to be done. There was a mission that he had not fulfilled yet, alayhi salatu wasalam. There was more that needed to happen. So he started taking initiatives. The first thing that he did, a consensus of Medina. Do you realize that he did this? You ever thought about that? He did a census of Medina. You know what census is? When they go and they count. Yeah, I know. When they go and they count heads. He did this. He sent people out and they counted heads. How many people do I have in this city? How many of them are muhajirin? How many of them are ansar? How many of them are Muslim? How many men? How many women? How many are over the age of 65? How many of them are less than 15? How many of them can actually bear arms? How many people are educated and can read and write? How many actually have a job? How many are married? How many children do we have? He did a census, alayhi salatu wasalam. We still don't have one for this city that's appropriate. We still don't have one. It's 2024, and I still don't know how many people I have in this city and where they live, despite our best efforts. So despite the fact that we have 2 or 3 groups trying to get this done, I still don't know exactly where I have an idea, obviously, because you drive around the city and you see a lot of Arab and Pakistani kids. You know, all right, here's where a lot of people from our background live. But I don't know. How many refugees do we have? How many people who are making less than 20 or 30K a year? How many people are disabled? How many people have mental illness problems? We don't know. I don't have a census. So I'm up there speaking and I'm shooting in the dark. I don't know. I don't know if what I'm doing is actually working or not because I don't know who I'm speaking to. Because we don't have a census even for our own city. He performed a census of Medina, alayhi salatu wasalam. It allowed him, it gave him the ability to plan accordingly. He planned appropriately for everything, because he knew how many people he actually had in his city. That was something that, is, if you don't see that as so ahead of his time, really, so ahead of his time, that he did this. He actually had people do this and bring back in the reports. And he's looking, all right, I understand now. He even understood how much wealth there was, how many trees, how many orchards there were there, how much food can this place, how many wells of water, how much water is made. He knew his country, so he was able, to, all right, Ali is giving me the evil eye. All right, so we'll start with, I'll stop with that inshallah ta'ala. Next week, there's a few more initiatives that he did alayhi salatu wasalam I'll talk about. And then we get to enjoy talking about the first battle, which is Battle of Badr. So please make sure you attend it, because this is where the stories are enjoyable, and so you have a good time. Inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Subhanallahi walhamdihi, la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Jazakumullah khair.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. I hope you guys are all doing absolutely phenomenal today. We're going to get started with our Kahoot as soon as we can, inshallah, because Sheikh Anan went 1 minute over his allocated time. So, if we can get into the game as soon as we can, please, we can get started very quick. The game code is 3581319. Fayed. How are we doing so far? Everybody have enough time? Can you mute the music? I hear it. Okay, ready? Quick, yalla yalla. From a show of hands, who still needs a little bit more time? Of course. Okay, you're in, right? Ready? Everybody ready? Okay, let's get started. Bismillah. Let's get started. Okay. So the Kahoot questions are made by me in the corner over here while Sheikh Hanan is talking. So hopefully everybody is paying attention. Question number 1. What was one of the biggest social changes in Medina? Social changes. Was it the concept of Jum'ah, the economy change in Medina, the poverty levels in Medina, or the Ahlul Sufa living in the masjid? What was the biggest social change of Medina? Jum'ah is correct. Let's see the leaderboard for the first question. We have Salman first, MHT in second, Jarrad X Ibrahim in third. MashaAllah. Let's move to the next question. True or false? You should take the day off from work on Jum'ah, Yawm al-Jum'ah. Is that true? Or is that false? This is so easy if you're paying attention. Come on. Don't shout out the wrong answers or the right answers. False. You should not take off the day. It's considered makruh in all 4 madahib, according to Sheikh Hanan. Okay, we have a new third place, which is Vish. Everybody else is the same. We have Ghada in 4th and Sarah in 5th. Next question. Question number 3. Who organized the meeting to see if people agreed or disagreed for Jum'ah? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Abu Bakr, people of Quraysh. I can't lie, I did not make this question. I didn't make this one. The meaning was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded that organization. So we have a new leaderboard. Fayyaz in first, Saad in second, Mr. Halal in third, and Vish has the highest answer streak of 3. Let's move to question number 4. What was the creation that made a physical noise during Jumu'ah? This one is also very easy. Why are you not on the leaderboard, bro? A tree is correct. The calf was the sound it made like. It was described to make a sound like a young calf crying. But the creation that made the noise itself was the tree. Okay, next question, quick, because we only have 4 minutes. That's the leaderboard. We'll move to the next question. Question number 5. What was established in Medina that wasn't allowed in Mecca? Agriculture, Tim Hortons, trade and business, or the army? It might be Tim Hortons. It might be. The army is correct. The Jaish. Okay, next question. Quick. We now have Zach Isa in first, Mr. Halal in second, Saad in third. Next question. Question number 6. Multi-select. Jihad means what? Multiple of these are correct. It could be 2, it could be 3, it could be all of them. All of them could be correct. Don't shout out the answers. They are all correct. So if you selected all of them, you get more points than everybody else. Next question. Oh, Saad is now in first, Vish in second, Mr. Halal in third. Let's. Question number 7. How many battles in total were there? Total number of battles. Hopefully you guys were paying attention to the number. 29 is correct. MashaAllah. Vish, first place, MashaAllah. By the way, Tim Hortons gift cards for the winners, as usual. Where was the first Qibla? The original direction where they used to pray. Where was it facing? Masjid al-Aqsa is correct. The leaderboard remains unchanged. Second last question. Masjid al-Qiblatayn is the masjid that they had Jumu'ah in, they slept in, they memorized the Quran in, or they changed the Qibla in. Which one is it? It's only one correct answer though. Like the main thing that the masjid is known for. Green is correct. Qiblatayn, the 2 Qiblas. Okay, Saad is in first, Vish in second. I don't know who's in third. Last question, true or false? Your Qibla is your daily reminder of who you are every day. Your Qibla. Is that true or is that false? This is an easy question. Please everybody get this one right. Oh, 2 people, okay. It's okay. That is true. Let's see the last final leaderboard, see who wins their Tim Hortons gift cards. Question number, third place, Ibrahim and Muhammad. Second place, Saad. And first place, we have Vish, mashallah, tabarakallah. Thank you guys, everybody, for playing. I hope you guys all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed it. And we will see you guys next